Shalom, DC, with the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge, started up 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under the manager on YAHANNA. Since 1969, we've been teaching the truth of the Bible. And the truth is that blacks, so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans are the true Jews. And we do not know this is because that the white man has taught us differently, right? That he is the devil that the Bible speaks of.
That's right, Lord.
A lot of people hate that we say that, and they think that we're calling the white man some mythical creature that lives under the earth that has horns and hooked feet. We're not talking about that devil. That's a made up character, made up figure. The devil, according to the Bible, is a deceiver. He takes the truth, gives you a little bit of the truth, and makes you believe something otherwise other than the truth. So all this time while we're in America, we were led to believe that we were nothing. We were just a bunch of poor niggas and spicks and rednecks, and that we amount to nothing. And that is the world over knows us to be that way. But the truth of the matter is that the Most High calls us something else, and we are His chosen people. That's according to the Bible.
Right.
What I'm about to get into correlates with what's been going on this past couple of weeks, and that is the election of the U.S. president. Right now, as of right now, according to the Electoral College, we have a new president. We have a new slave master. It's a new president, a new leader to other nations, but to blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, we have a new slave master. And with that new slave master, even though he's a new slave master, the agenda has been the same since we've come to into his subjection, and that's to keep us in the low state, to keep us in slavery, to keep us subjugated unto them. Now, we were led to believe that if we participate in their democratic process, we would have some sort of say, some sort of representation in their government. But time and time again, history proves to us that we have nothing. Even though we participate, we have no representation. No one cares for us. No one really wants us to prosper in this society, in this kingdom. And the Most High tells us that we are not to appoint anybody who is not of us over us. And the reason being is just look at history in the U.S. It's just the U.S. is less than 300 years old. Just the history right here in the U.S., you can see how the U.S. has treated God's chosen people from its inception, from the time the first Europeans stepped foot on the land and killed off and subjugated and beat and all of the native peoples of this land, and then imported the rest of the peoples over here. You can see that we are not. They do not want us to have any sort of political clout, any sort of power, whether economical, political, or religious type of power in this nation.
Right.
This nation is not for us. We're going to get into something I came across. This happened as a direct correlation of us voting. Now, a lot of our leaders tell us, whether it's our leaders that we appoint in the church, or people who have a lot of money, or people who have a lot of followers, entertainers, especially a lot of entertainers, tell us that we need to vote. We need to vote. The Most High says something totally, completely different. The Most High appoints our leader. Only Him. He appointed our leader years ago, and He's always been our leader ever since then.
Right. There
is no voting for that. Most High says that Christ is our leader, is our King. That's it. There is no change in mind. That's it. So I'm gonna go into the. There was an election, a national election, back in 1920 in Ocoee, Florida. where a riot broke out after we, when I say we, blacks, participated in a vote. And this particular vote comes in is a particular importance because of the time frame and what happened. So we're going to get into this article right quick. Barack, if you could get me a white mob unleashed on the worst election day violence in U.S. history.
A white mob unleashed the worst election day violence in U.S. history in Florida a century ago.
So 100 years ago, after the direct, like I said, the direct correlation of violence that has been that happened to us, direct correlation that that since we voted, this is the what was called the white lash had happened to us. Continue if you could.
There are at least 129 accounts of what happened that day in Ocoee, and they vary widely. Some said the attack was a spur-of-the-moment reaction to a black man trying to vote. Others said it had been carefully planned by white residents for weeks. Only a few black folks were killed that day, or dozens of bodies were piled into a mass grave.
So right here is saying that, firstly, they were saying that they can't really account for how it started. They said it may have sparked when one black man started a vote, or that they planned this out weeks in advance.
Right.
That they planned this out weeks ago, or this was a spur in the moment count. We all know that in history, whenever there's a mob happening, it a lot of times it's spur of the moment. However, whenever stuff like this happens, especially it's an election day, there are a lot of mob participants that usually gather around and crowd around the election polls, the election center where the election is supposed to take place. Right. And when they see that people there who they do not want to participate, then I guess you can say it's a powder keg. So these people are like a powder keg, and that Negro, that black man who goes there to vote is just like a spark. That's kind of sort of like leaving, dry, oily rags in the garage or something like that. They say never leave something like that in a garage, or never store a lot of flammable materials together, right? Because sooner or later something's gonna spark. So whether they say it's a spur of the moment or this has been planned out weeks in advance, this type of behavior always happens. This happens time and time again. Right. This is nothing new when it comes to us. Right. They come together to try and stop us from participating in their culture. Right. We should have just listened to that. Okay, you don't want us to participate in your culture. The Most High says we should participate in your culture. But the difference is the Most High says if you do, you will be punished. That's right. And this is one of the punishments. Keep going.
Go. Every black resident who survived fled the day after, or survivors were harassed, threatened, and cheated out of land for the next 7 years until they all left.
So after this happened, there were landowners and people who actually had a stake in this way of life here in this part of the country. So after this powder keg happened, it didn't take that long for them to get all the blacks up out of there. And it said that they were cheated out of land. So it goes to show you that we actually were landowners. Right. It showed you that we were landowners. So last week I brought out the way that they allowed people to vote. Initially, it was just white men who owned land that were allowed to vote. They passed the 14th Amendment that allowed anybody who was born within the U.S. the right of citizenship. Right. Once they had the right of citizenship, they had the right to vote. In order for you to vote, then you had to own land.
Right.
So right here is showing you that this happened in 1920. This was some 60 years after the slaves were so-called emancipated, where they came together, had land, bought land, and they were within their own selves, building themselves up.
Right.
And when they participated or they executed their right under the Constitution to vote, they were killed, they were threatened, they were harassed, and they were run off.
Right.
And everything they had was taken from them. So this is like I said, it's a direct correlation to actually voting. Right here is a direct correlation, common concept.
So like, if I may, too, because what you're saying is so heavy, because we all know historically, the people who are targeted for lynch mobs and being hung were, like you just brought out, landowners and business owners, because it's directly tied into the right to vote. It's all tied together.
And then what Officer Kazak was saying was heavy is because not only were they tied in, those were the men who were actually allowed to vote according to the Constitution and certain state laws. Once they harassed them and chased them off and lynched them and killed them, they took their land.
Right.
It was divvied up amongst themselves. And we'll see. We're going to go a little further into what happened to those men who actually, committed these atrocities. Keep going, Bible Shaw.
This is what is certain. 100 years ago, on November 2nd of 1920, the same day, women voted nationally for the first time.
So right now, this is the, I want to say, the 19th Amendment. This is the 19th Amendment, which was women's suffrage, which gave the women the right to vote. So November 2nd, 1920 was the first time nationwide, this was a presidential election, nationwide, that women were allowed to vote. During this time, they were allowing women to vote, which really was just white women. They were allowing white women to vote. But this kicked off not because a woman came to vote, but because black men came to vote. Even though they gave black men the right to vote some 50-something years ago, it was still a problem. Right. They would allow the women to vote, but it was a problem when a black man came to vote. Even though they're saying, men are superior to women or whatnot, they allow the white women to vote, but let this nigga go back to his hut. Even though in this time, these men didn't have huts. They had land, they had property, right. They had businesses, they had money. And we're going to go into some of the accounts of what these men had. Right. Keep going, Robert Shaw.
The worst instance of election day violence in American history unfolded in a small Florida town west of Orlando.
Now, if anybody knows, one of the other major riots that had happened, that a black town was razed to the ground, was Rosewood. That also happened in Florida. So, and this happened in Florida as well. Keep going, Robert Shaw.
Good. And the perpetrators got away with what they did for the rest of their lives. There are no roadside markers in
Ocoee,
as you might find in Selma, I believe it's in Alabama. Mm-hmm. No excavation projects to locate the purported mass grave as in Tulsa. Until recently, many descendants of survivors had no idea that they were descendants of survivors, or that they had been robbed of a valuable inheritance long before they were born.
So what they're saying is, this was kept, hush hush. Mm-hmm. What they did after they committed this massacre, this atrocity, they made sure that people who were of our nation who was involved in this said nothing. And if they said anything, they made any little peep about it, they would make sure that they would be dealt with swiftly and harshly. Just like in the events with Tulsa, the police, after this happened, the police, the elected officials, the government, state and federal government came to these people, these survivors, and told them, you do not say anything to the reporters that are going to be coming here trying to investigate. You say nothing.
Right.
If you say anything, part 2 of this mob will happen, will come into effect. That's why 100 years later, we're finding out about this. How come I didn't learn about this when I was in school?
Right.
How come this is not learned in Black History Month? We got 28 days that we're supposed to learn about, our so-called history. How come we don't learn about, so-called peaceful revolutions from Dr. King?
Right.
What was peaceful about that? They was beating us up beside our heads, and we're just, trying to go to the lunch counter.
Right.
They were. That's what they're showing. And there was a video that Chris Rock put out where I don't know if you brothers seen it, where he was talking about how he said he hates civil rights movies because all they show, and this is what we've been taught in school, all they show is that we were tired of sitting at the back of the bus and not being able to order at a lunch counter.
Right.
When in fact, white supremacy at that time this was during the Depression. If a white family was hungry and they smelled something cooking on the Black side of town, they would simply walk into your house and take your food, and there wasn't a damn thing you could do about it. I dare you to raise your voice. I say something. Say something. Now, you a man. You work hard during a time where nobody really can eat a real meal, and you bring home food for your family, and someone else comes into your house and takes that food that you have for your family, and there's nothing that you can do about it. What is your woman going to think about you? What is your children going to think about you?
Right.
What kind of psychological damage does it does to you and your family when that happens? We are totally destroyed. Now that was real white supremacy, not because we couldn't sit in the back of a bus or anything like that. Who gives a damn about sitting in the back of the bus? Most of the time, Black people, we go straight to the back of the bus. It ain't really about sitting in the back or ordering, from a lunch counter.
Right.
It really wasn't about that. So they're saying that these survivors, because when they did this article and they were researching this, they heard, rumors and tales about the people who are actually researching it. And then when they went to research it and found the descendants didn't even know about it.
Right.
Because they were their parents and grandparents were so terrified. They were terrorized into silence. We were told to keep our mouths shut, and we believed those threats. Because in those days, they would straight up come into you and shoot you dead. And that was an easy way out. A lot of times they would surround you, beat you halfway to death, cut your genitals off, and hang you from a tree. That was our fate if we disobeyed Massa. So when they said shut your mouth and don't say nothing, unfortunately, that's what we did. So when it came time for these descendants to read a story or hear a story about this, they knew nothing about it. Nothing. Keep going, Baba Kashaw.
God. Now, after years of research, a new exhibit at the Orange County Regional History Center in Orlando has unearthed a crime long buried. Quote unquote. Most of the people living in Ocoee don't even know that this happened there, said Pamela Swartz, chief curator of the History Center. Neighbors for 30 years.
All right, so now we're about to get into the relationship of this town, of this city that's right outside of Orlando.
Right.
Keep going.
Ocoee was found in the 1850s by a white man who brought 23 enslaved African Americans with him, Swartz said.
So this is during slavery. He came there with his slaves. He came to this part of the country with his slaves. In the 1850s, Florida did not become a state until it was about 20 years prior. So this was a fairly new addition to the Union of the United States. So there was a lot of land to be dealt with. A lot of people, it was like the Wild West where you go out there and stake your claim. This was new territory at the time. So this white man came out there with his 23 slaves to basically strike it rich. Keep going.
After the Civil War, many Confederate veterans resettled there, hiring black laborers to work their land. Starting in 1888, many of those laborers were able to purchase the very acres over which they had been toiling from their white employers.
So right here is showing you that after the Civil War, former Confederate soldiers, had land, and they needed labor to work those fields. Does anybody know what happened? This time frame around the 1880s? That was the time of Reconstruction.
Yeah.
Reconstruction. What Reconstruction was? It had Union soldiers in the land to enforce the peoples out there not to mess with us. It was hard for these people to see their former property as human beings right now. So they enacted a lot of laws, a lot of rules right after the Civil War to make sure to keep us in subjugation. During Reconstruction, the Union soldiers was there to counteract that effort. So during this time, the former slaves were hired laborers because Reconstruction was there at that time. During that time, they were able to actually purchase land of their own during this time when Reconstruction was going on. Keep going.
Bringing them wealth and security often denied to black folks in the Jim Crow South. So
while this is happening, it was kind of like what you see, in the kind of like in the North, where you have pockets of blacks and whites kind of living together in sort of relative harmony, but things, the underbelly was brewing over time until it bubbled over in 1920. Keep going.
Census records indicate that in 1920, about 1/3 of the town of 800 was black.
So that goes to show you that there was this town had a lot of black people. Keep going.
Though it isn't accurate to say Ocoee was integrated, there wasn't a blacks only neighborhood across the probable tracks as you might find elsewhere in the South.
So right here they're painting a picture. It's showing you that there was integration in these communities. It wasn't just a section, a pocket of town where it's just blacks, and then the rest of the town was whites. They all worked and they all lived together. That's what happened during this time. Keep going.
It was, quote unquote, it was interspersed. It wasn't like, here's a black part of town, here's a white part of town, Score said. These people were neighbors for 30 years before the massacre happened.
So for 30 years, there was a whole generation of people that lived together and worked together. And it wasn't a major incident that happened in sight until there was a catalyst that happened. And that catalyst we're about to get into right now. And that was the spark, so-called, that sparked what was going to happen. Even though they lived together, they worked together without any major incident for 30 years, for a whole generation. Nothing really happened until this happened. Keep going.
After World War I ended in 1918, the same trends happening nationally took hold in Ocoee too. Black veterans returned home expecting better treatment as they got in Europe, but white supremacist groups such as the Ku Klux Klan resurfaced to keep that from happening. Racist violence erupted all over the country in what became known as the Red Summer of 1919.
The Red Summer of 1919. So what happened was the World War I ended, and in order for the president to gain troops, this is before a draft. We didn't have drafts at that time. But in order for the president, and this was Woodrow Wilson that was president at that time, for the president had to get troops, they had to promise that you're one, fighting for something, and two, if you returned, we would give you, we would give you something. A lot of those benefits, even now, a lot of people join the military for those veteran benefits. Some of those benefits include school. Some of it is a guaranteed home loan. Some of it is, health care for you and your family. There's like right now there's work preferential treatment. You can get certain loans. You can get certain type of jobs contractually wise if you're a veteran. So those are some of the benefits that the government came up with to entice people to go to war for them and possibly die. Those benefits were promised to everyone, both black and white. Now, when we actually went to war for the U.S. in World War I, we were dying over there just like they were dying. We were fighting just like they were fighting. They hated us so bad, the U.S. I'm speaking of, is that we were allied with, the Allied forces, which is like, France, UK, Spain, places like that, against essentially Germany, Austria. They hated us so bad that we weren't allowed to fight with our so-called nation. They didn't want us with them. Instead, they pawned us off to some of the hardest hit regiments, and some of those regiments were French and British regiments, of course, because it was over there. It was right there. Germany borders France, so they pawned us off to France with the agreement of, here goes some soldiers. They're all black regiments, but if we give you these guys, you are not to treat them equally. They need to be separated. Here are our list of rules that they have over here. If you go over there, if they come over here and you treat them basically human with rights and dignity, they're going to come back and want rights and to be treated humanly over here. So we cannot allow that. But since we're allies, we're going to give you some people. Here are these people. We don't think we hate them, so we're sending them to the hardest hit places in the war, hoping that they'll die and not come back. We won't have to promise them anything. Right. But the thing is, we went over there, we fought, and in most instances, we won. Right. We fought so hard, we actually, won the admiration of some of these other nations, like French and the British. They wondered, why is your own country treating you like this when we see how hard you're fighting, how diligent you are, how loyal you are. We see this day in, day out. Why are they treating you like this? We can't really answer that. Right. We couldn't answer that. But once we went over there, they treated us like, humans. I'm not gonna say they treated us equal. They treated us like somebody who mattered. Why? Because there was no atheists in foxholes. When there's guns pointing at you and bullets flying over your head, you praying to whoever God that they told you was a God. And we prayed to that white Jesus. We died, and just like General Muhammad said, we died in all your wars. We prayed to your white Jesus. We saluted the flag, and when we came home, they beat us like dogs. Right. They treated us like even worse than what it was before we went over there. Now, how is that? We're in the effort to help spread so-called democracy, but once we get back to our so-called homeland, there is no democracy for us. Right. What kind of hypocrisy is that? That's outright hypocrisy. Moreover, like I said, in 1868, it gave black men the right to vote. But here in 1920, you're giving us problems where it sparked a riot that was the worst riot in voting history for 100 years. But yet a constitutional right gave us a constitutional right to vote some 60 years prior to that. How is that? That's hypocritical.
Right.
Their sacred document, which is not the Bible, is their constitution. They believe more in their constitution. This nation believes more in their constitution than they do believe in the Bible. And it has always been like that. No matter what they spew about, their love of God and country, for them, their country, which is their constitution, comes first.
Right.
So if they say right in their constitution that you have the right to vote, but then there's people who construct this constitution deny you the right to vote, what kind of hypocrisy is that? Why would you even want to vote for any people who would go back on not only their word but their sacred document? Their document is so sacred, and that document outlines, your rights, but then they renege on that.
Right.
What kind of beast is that?
Right.
Why would you want to attach yourself to anything that they tell you anything about them? Why? Because it's all babble. It's all babble.
That's right.
Now, even though we went over there, we fought, we came back. Now, this happened right after the war. We came back, we were promised certain things. And since war changes people, whether you've been in a physical war, with guns and bazookas and all that, or a spiritual war, or just, a fight, it changes you. You're not really scared of the things that you was scared of before, prior to that. So once we came back, and we knew what our rights were before we left, but when we came back, they have to, honor their word now. So when we went to vote and they reneged on that opportunity again, we was like, enough's enough.
Right.
And what happened was the Red Summer of 1919. If you could, Baba Kashar, can you get me that article? We're going to get into a little bit of the Red Summer of 1919 and what happened to the black vets once we got back from war.
I got the Red Summer of 1919, how black World War I vets fought black. Red Summer of 1919, how black World War I vets fought back against racist mobs. The ink had barely dried on
the Treaty of Versailles.
The ink had barely dried on the Treaty of Versailles, which formally ended World War I, when recently returned black veterans grabbed their guns and stationed themselves on rooftops in black neighborhoods in Washington, D.C.
Right here in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., niggas was fed up. You come over here, you fought. You seen people die. You see your friends, your comrades in arms. You seen them die. You seen them get their limbs blown up. And you fought for this stinking country. And when you come back, they put you in more subjugation from people who probably ran from fighting themselves.
Right.
They weren't man enough to go out there and fight, but you was. You actually went out there and fought and survived. And your mentality is a little different. Once you actually been to war, once you actually been in a battle, the things that scared you before and you had to you've been confronted in that battle, you do not think the same. Things are much, much different. These men seen atrocities that first of all, even before they even went over there, they seen atrocities happen against them. That should have been enough to say, well, you fight your own war. But nah, we went over there trying to prove ourselves, trying to say, hey, we are worth more than 3/5 of a man, of a human being. We're worth more. And we went over there and we fought valiantly. We fought hard. But when we came back to much of the same. It was probably even worse. Why? Because we weren't looking down anymore. We were looking them in the eyes and telling them, hey, we want what's ours. And that angered Whitey, something fierce. That angered them fierce. So what happened was riots essentially broke out all over the country.
Right.
All over the country. Why? Because black men, veterans, were returning home from war all over the country. We were standing up, looking white men in the eye all over the country, demanding what the Constitution gave us the right to do. And of course, you know, white people didn't like that. Keep going.
God. And stationed themselves on rooftops in black neighborhoods in Washington, D.C., prepared to act as snipers in the case of mob violence in July of 1919. Others set up blockades around Howard University, a black intellectual hub, creating a protective ring around residents.
See, I didn't even know about a lot of this stuff the summer of 1919. Again, why wasn't this in our history books? Why didn't we learn this at least during Black History Month? Yeah, sir. It is an issue. A lot of this stuff would open up a lot of the youth's eyes to see who the real enemy is. We did what you say you wanted us to do, and then when we come back, you take away everything that you promised and give it to the deserter who we had to pull out of a foxhole. And this happened right here in DC. This happened right here in DC. Keep going.
Right.
God. White sailors recently home from the war had been on a days-long drunken rampage, assaulting and in some cases lynching black people in the capital streets.
Right here in the capitals, in the nation's capital. You would think that wouldn't happen, at least in, you know, the president is right there. You wouldn't think that would happen here in DC. You think that would happen somewhere deep down in the bayous of Louisiana or somewhere in the by the Mississippi Delta. You would think this type of stuff would happen there, because what we know, we think of DC as kind of, you know, sort of the north, even though it's the south. We think of DC as being the north. Why? Because it's the capital of the United States. You would think, you know, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, places like that, stuff like this would happen. Why? Because it's the deep south. They have, you know, history of doing this type of stuff. But no, this happened right here in the nation's capital. And this is coming from veterans. This is coming from military men who most likely served with some of these men that they're beating and lynching. Keep going, Barbara Shaw.
The relentless onslaught proved contagious, escalating in dozens of cities across the United States in what would become known as the Red Summer.
So this just didn't happen here. It happened all over the capital, all over the nation. Like I said, because the military doesn't just pull from one state or one region of the country. They pull from all over the U.S. And when we answered that call, once we came home, we went back to where we were from, with our heads held high, with our uniforms on. And a lot of white men hated to see that. And a lot of them lynched us in that uniform. How dare you, you know, soil the U.S. uniform with your dark skin? How dare you? This is our treatment. Keep going, Barbara Shaw.
Go. The racist acts in 1919 were widespread and often indiscriminate, but in many places they were initiated by white servicemen and centered upon the 380,000 black veterans who had just returned from the war.
So we fought a war where an enemy didn't care what color we looked like or, you know, what race we were. They just knew that we were on the opposite side of them. We survived that war, and we come home when we were fighting directly side by side with these guys in some cases. And those people whom we mostly saved their lives, we came home to have them lynch us. I don't know if anybody's seen Red Tails. That was World War II. This wasn't World War I. Right. World War II. Red Tails had a distinction about them. All of their bombing trips They lost no bombers, 0 bombers. No one else can boast that record.
Right.
We were so good that we were so good, we didn't lose anybody that we were highly requested from bombing crews. If they knew that if we flew with them, they would make it home from that trip. No other crew can, and we had to fight for the opportunity just to go up. And then when we came back, much like what happened in after World War I, happened after World War II. All the rights that was promised to us for being veterans, for fighting their war, we didn't get. It was something like 1 or 2% of black vets that actually cashed in on some of their perks, their privileges. Everybody else, hard no. You ain't getting nothing. Nada. But they're saying veterans, military veterans who seen war, kid was going to kill other black men who have seen the very same war that they have seen. We're nothing to them. Nothing to them. Keep going, Bible Shaw.
Because, quote unquote, because of their military service, black veterans were seen as a particular threat to Jim Crow and racial subordination. Notes a report by the Equal Justice Initiative. Indeed, many African American soldiers returned from the war armed with a renewed determination to fight segregation and a near constant barrage of brutality.
So, when we came back from the war, we had, like I said, we had a different mentality. We fought over there. We were given the means to fight over there, even though there was a lot of times, a lot of instances where we were only there for manual labor, doing the grunt work, like digging latrine holes, burying bodies, burial details. There was a lot of that going on, but there were instances where we were allowed to fight, and when we were allowed to fight, we exceedingly went over expectations. So when we came back home, we were of a different mindset. We didn't take kindly to a lot of this foolishness that was happening before, and a lot of men were standing up for themselves. And because they stood up for themselves, a lot of our strong men were killed. Were killed because of this. It was a lot easier after the war to fight back. I'm gonna tell you a story. There was not a few years ago. It was probably back in 2013, around that time frame. There was a lot of veterans, whether they were either committing suicide or they were actually, killing other people. And that was particularly due to those military members going to war and actually seeing action. A lot of times they would go out on patrol and some of their buddies wouldn't come back with them. One squad would go this way, another squad would go that way. Patrol, go around patrol Afghanistan or Iraq or something like that. When they come back, that squad, that platoon, that went out wouldn't return home. That messed with people. That messed with people mentally. When they would go out, they would see action. They would see contact. They would have to put someone down or get put down. So if that happens, once they come back, conflicts arise, and they're not that. It's not that difficult to take life. Why? Because they have done it a number of times before in the war. That line has been blurred once they come back. So what happened was I was just getting out. I had something about 70 days of terminal leave, and I could have either got paid right there in one lump sum or just waited out, get paid every time I was supposed to get paid. Once I was doing that, I decided to take terminal leave. I was basically on vacation, and I had an opportunity to travel, and on the government's dime. They have a program called Space Aid. It's called Space Available, basically you go to a military air base, and whatever base that they're going to, you can just hop on a ride if they have a space available, right? So I was there for maybe the down part is you just sitting there for a couple days, maybe. I was there for a couple days. I was supposed to be going to Germany. Flights just couldn't get out. So I wound up going to Spain. While I was there, it was this one dude that I was waiting with for like 2 days. We were sitting there just talking, and he was telling me he was in the army. He was telling me about this one story about how his unit had went out. He had gotten there after the unit went out. So they were out for about 9 months. The trip was supposed to be about 9 months, and they were supposed to come back, their rotation. They were out there for about 3 months or so. They have like a program in the back where they have the spouses, the military spouses, and they have they have a group where they come together and they get information from the command, letting them know how that group is doing over in war and whatnot.
Right.
They had a new sergeant. They had a new first sergeant. New first sergeant there come there. Now, if anybody knows anything about first sergeants are damn near God. They wield a certain amount of power within the military structure. If they say something, a lot of times you're going to obey that order over an officer's order. Why? Because they're kind of like there for the people and whatnot. They've seen everything. So this dude got there. These two guys got there at the same time. He was a younger enlisted man. This first sergeant came there. He was put over that group where the spouses, military spouses, come together and they give information out, and they put on events for them a lot of times. There was this one spouse in particular who was fairly young and had recently been married, like newlyweds, about a year or two or less. She was going back quite frequently, quite often. One thing led to another, as they say. He wound up, sleeping with that woman, right? So once that rotation was over, that soldier comes back. Once he comes back, things are off. Things are different. She confesses that that she had an affair with the first sergeant. Now he's like an E2, maybe an E3, and he's pissed off at a first sergeant. If you're pissed off at a first sergeant, you're a lower ranking. There is no you pissed off at a first sergeant. That's because he's a first sergeant and you're private, right? You ain't gonna say nothing. But since he's been to war, he's seen things, he's done things. He doesn't give a crap about any of that. He finds out, the command finds out that he found out, and he's on his way going to shoot this dude in the face. They can't find this dude. He goes dark. He can't find his car. Can't find him via his phone. He's looking for this guy.
Right.
The first sergeant doesn't know this, but like I said, the command found out. The command comes to him, comes to his house, pulls him out of his house, and puts him on a plane right then and there, and said, "We'll ship your stuff to wherever you're going to go. Someone's going his way over here to shoot you in the face, to kill you." So what I say by that is that had he not, gone to war, most likely he might not have, went dark, tooled up and went looking for this man. He might not have done. He might have done that, but I know after the war started, you heard a lot of people getting killed, by service members. A lot of stuff, it's not real natural to see war, see death like that, and that frequency, and that, and like that. I was at Quantico one time, and they had to shut the base down because it was an active shooter. Right at that point in time, the only information we had was 2 people were shot and dead, and they were looking for a man. It was a man that was killed, and it was a woman that was killed, and it was over at the officers candidate school where they're become candidates, right? become officers. The woman was like a little E2, E3 or something like that. And the man was a candidate to be an officer. Long story short, she was working there, and the guy that they were looking for was working in the command. So you got the E2, E3 that was there was married to the guy who was working there and was sleeping with one of the candidates. He killed both of them because he had came back from the war. He killed both of them. They were looking for him. Then he was like, "Well, I ain't going to jail." He killed himself. So I'm telling you, this mindset of these black soldiers that came back from war who killed, or if they didn't kill, they were going to be killed. They had a different mindset. They had a different mentality. So when they came back and they said, you can't sit at this counter, or we're coming into your house and we're going to take this food. Nah, son, you ain't going to do that.
Right.
And I know how to fight now. You know what I'm saying? I know how to organize. I know how to suppress and repel.
Right.
Nah, you ain't going to do that. That's not happening. And that's what these men did. They took up arms, got set up sniper positions on rooftops in their neighborhoods, just in case someone comes by. And when they did come by, they gave them all the business that they can handle. This was their mentality.
Right.
This was their mentality, and it didn't really end well. The reason why it didn't end well, get me Slovakia. If you could, get me Psalms 83. Psalms 83 and 2.
Come. Psalms 83 and 2.
Yeah. Baba Shah.
The book of Psalms, chapter 83, verse 2. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head.
So our enemies came together and made a tumult, and they are the ones that hate us. And they was like, okay, these former slaves are coming in our land, quote unquote, our land, our property, and demanding things of us when a generation ago they were in chains.
Right.
They were forbidden to even look at us in the eye. How dare they? Keep going.
They have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thine hidden ones.
So they came together. They came together and came up with a plan to basically invade our neighborhoods and put us to death, drag us out and put us to death. Anybody who resisted their supremacy was put to death. Right. And it didn't matter if you was a man or a woman or a child. If you had the nerve to look me in the eye and demand something of yourself, nah, you gotta go. You gotta go. You and your family, you gotta go. And during this summer, this wasn't just one riot. This wasn't just one mob. This happened during a summer in 1919, and it happened throughout the nation. It wasn't just one pocket of fighting. This happened, and then this happened right in DC. The president is right here. But you know who was in office at the time? President Wilson. Everybody knows, well, if you don't know, President Wilson was the first president to show a moving picture in the White House. And that moving picture was A Birth of a Nation, one of the most racist movies made by the Klan. And this president was the same person who played that movie and raved about it.
Right.
He had ties to the KKK. This was the only president that actually had only a high school education. You would think the last president was like that as well.
Right.
But this president, Woodrow Wilson, was the only president that had a high school education, and he's the one that played that movie that moving picture in the White House. When out back, around the corner, down the block, up the street, they were actually doing that to us.
Right.
And he turned a blind eye. He refused to do anything about it. This happened for a whole summer. Think about it. A whole summer where you can't go outside. And if you do go outside, something's going to happen. Give me Ezekiel 35:5. Bob Kashaw.
Ezekiel 35:5. The book of Ezekiel, chapter 35, verse 5. Because thou hast had a perpetual hatred, and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword.
They have had a perpetual hatred. Perpetual means everlasting. This happens all the time. They, from the beginning of time, from the womb, we were fighting.
Right.
Two nations were fighting in the womb. They hated us since then.
Right.
And it says what?
Because thou hast had a perpetual hatred, and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, in the time that their iniquity had an end.
So right here, from the beginning and until the end of time, well, I don't want to say until the end of time, until they no longer exist, they will hate us. Because there will come a point in time where we won't have to worry about them ever again.
That's right.
They will be an afterthought. They will be in museums. And that hatred that they have of us, it won't be anything. It will be in history books. Like we're reading about this account. That's how we're going to read about their account of their hatred towards us.
That's right. And
I pray I see that. Bible Shaw, give me Lamentations 4:18. That whole summer was hell.
Right.
And it's not like hell let up. Hell for the blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans won't let up until the Most High sends Christ back. That's the only time hell would stop for us. Why? Because this kingdom will no longer exist, and his kingdom will come into fruition.
The book of Lamentations, chapter 4, verse 18. They hunt our steps.
So we go outside, we try to do anything. This is what's happening to us. Back then, before that, and now. It's happening right now. Keep going.
They hunt our steps that we cannot go in our streets.
We can't even go in our streets. Why? Because we worried about, who's in back of us. We worried about who's going to be following, who's going to be looking at us.
Right.
Was it Ahmaud Arbery went jogging in his neighborhood? I mean, it was his neighborhood. He ran out 2 miles. He was out 2 miles. That's fairly close. That's if anybody is a runner, 2 miles is really not a long way away.
Right.
That's really nothing. He ran two miles from his house where he was hunted down.
Right.
He was stopped. He went around them. They got in 2 cars. They got in their pickup trucks and chased him down. They tried to stop him a second time. He went around them and he kept going. That third time, they ran in front of him and forced him to stop. They hopped out and executed him.
Right.
He tried to fight back. And this is his neighborhood. He's running in his neighborhood. They hunted that man in his own streets. Keep going, Bible Sean.
Our end is near. Our days are fulfilled, for our end is come.
You hear what the Most High says. Our end is near.
Right.
Only thing I can say is turn back to the Most High.
That's right.
Turn back to the Most High. Because what's going to happen next, you're going to need some protection. You're going to need some protection. The Most High is your shield, is your buckler. He's the only one that can protect you.
Right.
The only one. You hear of things that happen, hey, I was, going down the street, something like that. And then I hear, police siren comes by and blasts right by me, don't even see me, and gets the car right in front of me. Or here's a perfect example. I was in Afghanistan, and it was this guy who was this guy I was working with. We were in a night shift. He had to do a perimeter check. He was going around doing a perimeter check. This is Afghanistan, Kabul. He hears gunshots firing in the background. It seems kind of distance, but it's a 12-hour shift. It was going on all night. There's one particular point where he was doing his check. He was doing it. It kind of got louder. Once it got louder, he had to go off like back in like this little alley. He hears right, and then he looks and he sees where impact marks. He sees impact marks where he just was. Right. After that, he doesn't go back over that section again that night. That's the covering that the Most High can offer for you. That's part of the covering. Right. If you do not come back to the Most High now he wasn't in the truth, but that doesn't mean that wasn't a warning from the Most High to tell him to get in the truth. A lot of us have warnings before the Most High, puts down the final hammer. Like I'm sick of this stuff. You out. He gives us warning time and time again. A lot of times we don't know it. Sometimes we know it and just ignore it. We need to take heed to these warnings. That's right. Before he cuts us off and we have no more opportunity, we get it started all over. You don't want that. You don't want that. Heed this warning. Turn back to the Most High before it's too late. Right. Keep going, Baba Shah. No. Actually, go back to the article of the 1919 the Red Summit.
Okay, and go for where I left off at.
Yeah.
A postal official wrote at the time that, quote, as far back as the first movement of the American troops to France, the Negro publicists began to avail themselves of the argument that since the Negro was fit to wear the uniform, he was therefore fit for everything else. In Texas, a federal agent reported, quote, one of the principal elements causing concern in the returned Negro soldier who is not readily fitting back into his prior status of pre-war times.
Now, if you go to war and you're getting treated a certain way in that war, and you come back to subjugation, one, you're gonna fight back. You're really gonna fight back. That's like if anybody who's been living in the ghetto, been living, in the hood all their life, and they actually, come to a place where they get a good job. They actually get to move into a place where they don't have to worry about rent. They don't have to worry about food. They don't have to worry about healthcare. They don't have to worry about, the dangers that sometimes the hood brings. Kind of let your guard down a little bit. You rest easy. And then after a certain time, you're taken out of that place and put back into the hood. You kind of gonna fight. You kind of gonna fight like, yo, I had it good over here. This job was paying me X, Y, and Z. I had 2 bedrooms. I wasn't living in a studio. I didn't have roaches or rats. Didn't have to worry about where my next meal was coming from. But now that was taken from me. It wasn't that I left that, it was taken from me. And now I have to, be right back here in squalor. Now I have to be right back here in squalor. But you telling me that if I can get back, or I can get that back, all I have to do is demand it? Well, I'm going to demand it. Right. In order to get out of there, I had to fight to get out of there the first time. Now I know how to fight. I'm trained. I'm actually going to do that thing that I was taught to do. And you ain't gonna hold me back. Right. And I got other brothers who feel the same way. who's in my same position, who's learned that stuff as well. So yeah, nah, man, I ain't going back. I ain't going back. Keep going back with Shaw.
At the same time, cities across the North were being reshaped by the Great Migration. By the end of 1919, about 1 million African Americans had fled segregation and a total lack of economic opportunities in the South for northern cities.
So right here, the Great Migration basically is the enactment of Jim Crow laws. Once the Jim Crow laws, Reconstruction left, Jim Crow came into effect, and they actually, got the white supremacists got used to Jim Crow down there. We was like, nah, man, we can't have this. The Great Migration happened, where many of us, the former slaves that was down there, was fed up, and we left. We left in droves from the South, the deep South, up to northern cities like Chicago and Philadelphia, and so on. A lot of these cities, and it's going to show you exactly how much. Keep going, Baba Shaw.
Between 1910 and 1920, the black population in Chicago grew by 148%, and in Philadelphia by 500%.
So after they seen a lot of Negroes coming up here to the north in mass, it got cause for great concern, and a lot of this stuff is about to sound familiar. Keep going.
Creating massive anxiety among white people in northern cities that black people were taking jobs.
What? Taking what?
Taking jobs, housing, and security from them.
So they were saying niggas was taking their jobs. They was taking their way of living, their housing, their security. When in fact, if you have more people coming here, like if I own a restaurant and more people actually come to the city, why would I be mad at that? That means my customer base will grow. I will have more money. I will then have to hire more people and do it all over again. That goes in any industry. More people, the more business that happens. I was talking to a brother in Canada, and he was saying that that the people in the U.S. has more of an opportunity to become wealthy than the people do in Canada. And I really didn't grasp what he was saying, just because how the way he was saying it. But in essence, basically, he was saying Canada, if people really don't know this, Canada is only 35 million people. That's California. You know what I'm saying? That's California. That's two states. The amount of people in those two states equal the amount of people in Canada. So it's just more opportunity, more basically of everything. So when these people are, having anxiety that, blacks are coming up and taking their jobs and taking their housing, no, it's you build more houses, more jobs come in. There's more people to service more things, more opportunity. But yet that narrative back in 1920 is happening right now. Mexicans are coming in and taking our jobs. They're freeloading. But yet, whenever you see, whenever you hear a story about immigration coming in, doing a raid, they don't do it in neighborhoods. They do it in factories. They do it at places of work. So how are they freeloading if they're actually working?
Right.
These goddamn devils are liars, and that's why we call them devils.
That's right.
That's a straight up lie. They're freeloading, but they're working. God damn, man, these people.
Right.
Boy, I tell you. And then on top of that, during that time, when we were coming up, black people were coming up from the South. You had tons of people immigrating from Ellis Island, New York. You had a ton of Irish people coming over. They weren't talking about them taking their jobs. How about that? What happened with that? But when we come, when people who are the quote unquote undesirables, we are undesirable to Esau. The Most High, we are the most desirable thing on earth. When it comes to us, we're stealing the jobs, we're stealing the houses. It's how economics work. You get more people, more opportunity comes, more currency flows through the economy, and essentially you build up. But keep going, Baba Kashar.
God. During the Red Summer, massive anxiety became During the Red Summer, massive anxiety became mass violence. Between April and November of 1919, there would be approximately 25 riots.
25. The Red Summer of 1919 had 25 riots. Keep going.
And instances of mob violence, 97 recorded lynchings.
97 recorded lynchings, at least. That's recorded. That's the one they actually, acknowledge. Keep going.
And a 3-day-long massacre in Elaine, Arkansas, during which over 200 black men, women, and children were killed after black sharecroppers tried to organize for better working conditions.
You see this? Look at this. So it said 3 days, a 3-day massacre where they killed 200 people. That's lynching right there. They killed 200 black men, women, and children. What the hell did children do? What did the men and women do to get killed for 3 days? They tried to organize. They tried to come together. They tried to come together and stand in unity as one. Where did they get it from? They most likely got it from their oppressors. They seen how the way they came together and got some power. So they said, well, why can't we do it? Why? Because you're, in our memories, cattle. You are not supposed to come together. And we're gonna learn you for coming together. We're gonna kill at least 200 of you, men, women, and children. And this is what they think of us. This happened for a summer. A summer in 1919, we were hunted down. Now, I don't mean to get too far into this, so we're gonna go back a little bit to Ocoee massacre. Yeah, go back and then go down to in Ocoee, black and white Republican leaders.
All right, so you said go down to where?
In Ocoee, black and white Republican leaders. I'm gonna read it right quick. In Ocoee, black and white Republican leaders held clinics to show black residents how to register to vote, pay a poll tax, and cast a ballot. Now, at the time, the law was you had to register, and in order for you to register, you had to pay a tax. Now, like I said, back in those times, around the 1920s, the black families actually were making anywhere between $15 and $20 a month. The registration fee was about $1.50 to $2 to register to vote. This is extremely oppressive to black people. Now, this poll tax was supposed to be for everybody, but they grandfathered in poor white people. And that grandfathered in poor white people was if you had someone who was able to vote before the Civil War, which we couldn't vote before the Civil War because we were slaves, you were exempt from the poll tax. So this poll tax kind of caught a lot of us because a lot of us around the country didn't have the money. But like I said, in Ocoee, even though we had land, we had a little bit of money. This was still an oppressive thing. Why? Because whites didn't pay it. It was just us. It was meant to keep us out of the election. I'm gonna go to the next one. It says in the 24th Amendment, it banned poll taxes in 1962. A month after the election, you got that?
I think so. A month before the election?
A month before the election.
Okay. A month before the election, two of the white leaders, attorney W.R. O'Neill and Judge John Cheney.
So an attorney and a judge, two white attorney and a judge. This is what happened. Keep going.
Received a threatening letter from the KKK. We shall always enjoy white supremacy in this country, and he who interferes must face the consequences. It read. So this sounds familiar. Just like they tried to kidnap that governor a few months ago. They threatened a judge and a lawyer, saying if you help these darkies try and vote us out, y'all gonna get the punishment. And this is blatant intimidation. This is blatant intimidation. Just for time's sake, I'm gonna skip over to the black vote. We like to think that our vote really does count. If you ask any Negro over 40 who was the first black president, they're going to say Bill Clinton. A lot of older black folk, middle-aged older black folk, love them some Bill Clinton. When in fact, Bill Clinton signed into law one of the most oppressive bills that led to mass incarceration and led to mass incarceration and led to us being destroyed. That 1994 Crime Bill Act that was proposed, that was written by our current president-elect Joe Biden, was signed into law by what any Negro over 40 calls the first black president, Bill Clinton. That was back in 94. And part of that bill was the 3 strikes rule. If you were convicted of 3 felonies, you were sentenced to life in prison. That was one of the things that led to mass incarceration. Now, some people say, well, you committed felony, that's a terrible thing. They automatically think of something like murder or rape or something like that. When in fact, here's another story. I know a guy who had a nephew who was about 22, 23 years old. He had a security clearance and he was working at the White House. He was trying to get his nephew put on because he knew, working there, you get paid a certain amount of money. So his nephew was young. He's trying to help his nephew out. He was trying to get him put on at the White House, but he had to pass the security clearance test, a background check. So he asked him, "Hey, you got any bad paper? And you got anything that will come back to haunt you?" He was like, "No, I ain't got nothing." So he put him in. They do the background check, and it comes back that he had a felony on his record. They came back and told him he called his nephew. He was like, "Hey man, I thought you said you didn't have any bad paperwork." He was like, "Yeah, I don't." He was like, "Well, they said you got a felony." And he was like, "Yeah, man, that was messed up. That was wrong." He was like, "Well, what happened?" He was saying, "I got pulled over because I was speeding or something like that. And when the cop pulled me over, he was like real rude. This was in Texas. He was real rude. He was talking to me any kind of way, cursing at me all the time. So he was like, after about 5 minutes of it, I got sick of it and just said F you." And he was like, "Well, what happened after that?" He was like, "Nah, he arrested me. He brought me out of the car and I was arrested." And he was like, "So what was the charge?" And he was like, the cop charged him with assaulting a police officer because he said F you after he was receiving, verbal assaults the whole stop. And that was a felony. Now under the Crime Act, if he would have said that 2 more times, he would have been locked up for life.
Right.
For life. And some of these felonies were, drug offenses, like holding a dime bag. You got a dime bag, that's a felony. You had some crack, even though we ain't supposed to be doing drugs. Most High said we ain't supposed to be doing drugs. You had some crack back then. That was a crack epidemic. We were put in jail. Right now, that same equality amount of substance. Right now, the white people will be put in hospitals. It's just unequal.
Right.
These were made to oppress black people, and this is the people. Like I said, any black man, woman over 40, love them some Bill Clinton. Love them some Bill Clinton. He's the one that did this to us. We voted him in. We got another one. The most dangerous place a black person can be is in a black womb, unfortunately. And we owe that to Roe v. Wade. We owe that to Roe v. Wade. That went all the way to the Supreme Court, and it had a vote of 7-2. Seven justices voted for it. 2 of them voted against it. And since they voted for it, it made abortion legal. Those people that voted for it, most of these people, black people, would have voted for that president that nominated them. And these people came from quote unquote blue states. These Supreme Court justices, they came from blue states. And if anybody knows, the blue states, so-called, are the Democrats, where black people live and die for. They allowed abortion.
Yep.
And abortion is the #1 killer amongst black people.
Right.
They are destroying generation after generation. Right now, the count from 1973 when it got confirmed to now is something like 65 million people. The last census shows black Americans is like 43 million people. We killed more black babies than we actually have black men and women right now.
Right.
I gotta say something. That has to say something. That right there, that ruling right there it would have put us at 100 million right there. It would have gave us 1/3 of the population of the nation instead of 13%. They know what they're doing. They have consulted together to destroy us with one consent.
Right.
They knew what they were doing. Planned Parenthood isn't in Beverly Hills. It's in Watts. Planned Parenthood isn't in Bethesda. It's in Hyattsville. It's in Southeast. It's not in Georgetown. It's not around the corner from the White House. It's not on Fifth Avenue. It's in Harlem. All these places, it's set up to destroy us.
Right.
It's in downtown LA. It's in Compton. This is where it's in the 9th Ward in Houston. This is where we live. They put these places where we are so that we can destroy ourselves. Also, Kazak actually put up a post that was real heavy. Most High is so gangster, he'll actually give you what you think you want,
right,
and watch you destroy yourself with it.
Right.
That's a gangster.
Right.
That's a gangster right there. Most people, it went over their heads when they seen something like that. But I know exactly what that means.
Right.
Black people wanted this they wanted Esau and that East Indian. And we're gonna see exactly how gangster the Most High is when they show themselves to be against us 100%.
That's right.
With that, I pass the class to Barak.
We security announcements. We're the I.S.U.P.K out of 1 West 125th Street out of Harlem, New York, under command of YAHANNA. New groups for brothers and sisters. When a new brother or sister comes into the school, they're off limits for 6 months. They're to be saluted only. They're here to save themselves of the world. After 6 months, if a brother or sister has an interest in a particular person, he or she must get permission from the head to speak to a brother or sister. There's another 6 months in which the brother and sister will court each other. After the 6 month period, the brother or sister will get permission from the head to marry.
tithes, which is a commandment. You can find this in the book of Numbers, chapter 18, verse 21. In the book of Malachi, chapter 3, verse 8 through 10. It means tenth in Hebrew, and it's pronounced ma'ashara. 10% of every penny of any increase the Lord gives you, you give to the treasury department or teacher. The priest fund, free will offering for priests, not mandatory, whatsoever amount you like to give. The upcoming holy convocation is the SHALAM. Is the Feast of Dedication, which is a Hanukkah, which is the 25th day of the 9th month by the space of 8 days. That'll be Wednesday, December 9th of 2020 for 8 days. You can find this in 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 52 through 61. Remind Akim and Abuafi and check on social media such as ISUPK.com, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and so on for I.S.U.P.K events and materials. If your brother wants to be a trooper in the school, you should start wearing all black, which includes black boots, black shirts, black pants, black headband, and scarf. And that I say Amajim, which means to stand. We're just going to do one courtesy salute to the teacher, men of Israel, Amajim Shabbat, Amajim Barak,
Yahweh Hashem Yahushua Barakatah.
Yahweh Hashem Yahushua Barakatah.
Glasses. Pack of these good notes I got here.
Just like you said, I really want to go into the red something.
That's
I had some notes on that too.